Hello and welcome to the John Rylands Research Institute and Library. And currently we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Manchester Guardian newspaper. And we're very lucky to have Janette Martin here with us today, who's a curator here of the exhibition, and she's got some very interesting looking objects here on the table for us to talk about. Janette, what have we got?
Well, we've got something very special here. This is the first edition of the Manchester Guardian, and as you can see, it was published on Saturday, the 5th of May, 1821, so just over 200 years ago. At this point, it cost you 7p, and it was produced weekly.
Oh, right, so it wasn't a daily paper at this point?
It certainly wasn't. In the sort of early 19th century, there were taxes on papers and taxes on newspapers as well. Wow. So you'd have to pay 2 bundles of tax, and this sort of really reduced the availabilities of newspapers and who could actually afford them. That's
very interesting, isn't it? Yeah. When I look at the paper and I think about how the Guardian or any paper would look today, it looks very different, doesn't it?
It certainly does. There's no headlines, there's no photographs. It's just column after column of very sort of densely typed print. So it's not very easy on the eye.
And now what I really want to know is what was the very first article in the very first Manchester Guardian issue? So we're looking up at the top left here, aren't we? What is the first article?
Well, prepare to be underwhelmed. It's actually all the front cover at this point used to be advertisements, so it's not news, it's adverts. And the very, very first item is about a black Newfoundland bitch, so it's a dog that's been lost, and they're just putting the notice in the paper. So I don't think they'd really thought about posterity here and what would be the famous first words.
Well, that actually leads us to the question of this has survived. But really, people wouldn't have been thinking of keeping a newspaper, would they? It was very much a throwaway thing, I suppose.
They were very much a throwaway item, and you can see the quality of the paper. It's very sort of cheap, acidic, it's falling apart. Yes. But I think it's about people's sort of inclinations to keep things that are meaningful. So you quite often keep the first and the last of something, don't you? Or you keep the edition that's 100 years old or 150, yes. Or the edition where you're in it. Yeah. So people keep things for different reasons.
So it probably survived because it's number 1, basically.
I think it did, yes.
So we'll never know if they found the dog. That might have been in number 2. So we'll have to find out maybe later on down the line on that one. So I was just wondering, actually, did the front page of the Manchester Guardian look like this for a long time?
It certainly did. It kept all the advertisements on the front, and it was a very late adopter of the sort of new fashionable approach of headlines and actual news items and stories on the front page. I think it was about September 1952 before it decided.
That late?
That late before it decided, actually, we'll put something eye-catching and something about the news on the front. Yeah,
that must have been quite a thing for the regular readers to suddenly wake up one morning and there it was.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And I do wonder if there was some snobbery involved, because it was, you know, the cheaper end of the market. It was the tabloids that had the news and the headlines. So, of course, so I do wonder.
Yes, yeah. Well, we've got 3 copies here. So can you talk us through why we've got 3 copies on the table?
Well, we were talking about how people keep first editions.
Yeah.
So what happened on the 5th of May 1921, so 100 years after the first edition, the Manchester Guardian publishes a very special supplement, and it talks about the history of the Guardian, but it also reproduces as a facsimile the first page. So if you look in that top left corner,
let's have a quick look.
You should be able to, hopefully.
My eyesight's going a bit here. Yes, supplement to the Manchester Guardian, May the 5th, 1921, facsimile of first number. Wow, and that's in quite good condition as well, isn't it?
It's not bad, is it? Yeah, so that's actually, you know, a fake. It's not the original, but because 100 years on, yes, it becomes valuable. But what I really was very delighted to find, so we've just had the 200th anniversary, and of course I had to rush out and buy a copy for our collections, indeed. And when I opened it up, there is a facsimile of the front page. So yet again, so now we have 3 editions of the first page.
That's great.
100-year intervals.
So I suppose in 100 years' time there could be 2 people like us chatting about 4 editions.
It's possible.
Quite possibly.
Yes.
That's lovely. Thank you very much for this. That's great. Well, let's move on to our second item, and it looks like some kind of album.
You'd be quite right. Oh. It's a photographic album, and it was actually presented to C.P. Scott on the occasion of the centenary of the Manchester Guardian. So they were celebrating two things. So it was 100 years, but it was also 50 years of C.P. Scott being the editor.
50 years as the editor?
Yes.
In one job?
In one job, yes. He continues.
Gosh.
He continues for another 7 years, so yeah, it's quite incredible. And C.P. Scott is so important for the Manchester Guardian. It starts off as a small-scale newspaper, and it's very much about advertisements, commercial news, with a bit of world news thrown in. But then it later becomes sort of internationally significant, and that's due to C.P. Scott and his interest in sort of world affairs.
So he must have had a massive impact on the direction and the style of the newspaper.
He certainly did. He was also a Liberal MP, so he was very much in tune with sort of the national parliamentary scene as well.
Kind of
he certainly did, yes.
Probably with the movers and shakers of the day, I suppose.
Indeed, yes. But that's enough about C.P. Scott. I need to tell you about what this is.
We need to go inside, don't we?
We certainly do.
Yeah.
So you can see on the first page it says the staff of the Manchester Guardian in the centenary year of 1921. So what you find is department by department there is a photograph of everybody who worked at the Manchester Guardian. So you start off with the directors, the editors, the London office, advertising, and it goes right through to the cooks, the cleaners, the watchmen, the maintenance staff. Absolutely everybody is there.
Wow, it reminds me a little bit of the old school class photographs where the tall ones at the back and or the teacher or the managers at the front. Yeah, it looks brilliant, doesn't it?
It does have that kind of feel to it, doesn't it? Yeah. And everybody on their best behaviour, they're all, sat very tidily.
Smartly dressed, all come in the Sunday best almost.
Yeah, well you say smartly dressed, but I think if we get to one of them, they're slightly more informal, yeah.
There's so many of them. I mean, what an enormous staff they have.
Yes, yeah.
I would imagine there are probably some jobs there that wouldn't even exist today.
Indeed, the telegraph room, you wouldn't have that today.
Of course, yeah.
The composing room.
Composing room, not for an opera.
Not music, no.
Not music.
I presume the typeset, yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, there are so many.
So I'm not finding the picture. Oh, here's the picture I want. So this is the stereo room. So we were saying everyone looked formal and tidy. What does that make you think?
That looks to me like those guys have just come off shift and gone, oh, we've got to go and have our photograph taken. And they've all got their overalls on. They're all covered in liquid, the oil and goodness knows what else and type. It's a fantastic photo, that. That really captures a moment in time, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. And it captures the personalities of the people so much more than the sort of regimented formal pictures, yeah.
Coming down to you, maybe a favourite of yours. Have you got a particular favourite?
Well, I have a favourite. This is a photograph of all the men that were involved in either the stables or the motor drivers. So this is 1921, and it's clear that the Guardian is still using horse and carts to deliver some of their newspapers. Yeah.
In the modern digital age,
yes.
People today would find it unbelievable that you'd actually need horses as part of your distribution network for a newspaper.
And the horses would then travel to the train station to load up the newspaper train, and then it would go all the way to London. And if there was a problem on that chain, the London audiences would not be reading the Guardian that day.
It could make such a difference, couldn't it? Yeah.
It could, yeah.
Can I ask you, Janette, who actually took these photographs? Do we know?
We do. So we know that the Guardian had its own photographer called Walter Doughty, and hopefully, oh yes, here we are. Oh. We have a picture of him, so it's Mr. H.W. Doughty, and you can see he's the chap with a very state-of-the-art camera.
Yes, it's probably what they would have called a portable camera back then, isn't it?
Yeah, so he starts at the Garden in 1908 and he's there for over 40 years, so there's definitely a pattern. It must have been a lovely place to work because people did stay for a very long time.
And the quality of the photographs is really good as well. I mean, it's preserved very well. So was this album presented to CP Scott?
Yeah, if we look at the front cover, you can see that this specific copy was presented to Charles Prestwich Scott, otherwise known CP Scott. What they also did, which I think is really lovely, is that whichever division you were in, you got your group photo and you got to keep that. So I do wonder, are the people in Manchester who have these, tucked away with family heirlooms? And if you do, we'd very much like to hear from you.
That'd be the next chapter in the story, wouldn't it?
It
really?
would, yes, yeah.
Fascinating. Well, it could be time to move on to our third item.